Hi everyone, and welcome to our diamond attic windows sew along. So here's our lovely completed cushion, and you will notice with our cushion that it is made up of 2 half hexagons and a diamond. So what we're going to do today is we are going to get our fabric pieces cut, and we are going to glue baste them and prepare them ready for stitching. So the first thing that we need to think about is our fabric options. So with our fabric options for our attic windows, which are our half hexagons, we need to have a light and a dark fabric, and they need to read as a solid. So they're not the places that you would use a really large print or a print that has changes of color. So for example, if you look at, I'll just pull this one out, the bottom fabric, what you'll find is that it's got sewing machines on it, and it's a fabulous fabric, but when we're cutting it into small pieces, we're not going to get a consistent color across our cushion, and so that we will lose the effect of the attic windows. The center fabric wouldn't be too bad, but the top fabric, which reads as a solid, even though it does have a small white print on it, it would be fine. But what I'm going to be using today is I'm going to be using 2 Kona solids, so a light green and a dark green, darker green, and a beautiful Liberty print. And they don't need to be distinctly light and dark, they just need to be light and dark with reference to each other. So I have a lighter fabric and a darker fabric. So I'm going to get prepared and change the camera, so I've got a close-up of, so you can see how I am going to cut and glue baste our pieces. So we'll get that set up and I'll be right back. So let's get started with cutting our fabric shapes. So from our half hexagon, which is that one there, and you can see it when the light reflects off it. From our light fabric and our dark fabric, we need 35 half hexagons. And from our diamond shape, we need 30 diamonds and 10 of our little tiny triangles. So for the moment, I'm going to put my print fabrics aside, and I'm going to just work on my light fabric. And from this fabric, I'm going to cut a 2-inch strip. I'm going to leave it doubled because I have got a nice sharp rotary cutter blade. So I am left-handed, so I do cut left and right-handed. So let's just pop that aside. Now the reason that I have cut a 2-inch strip is that I measured my piece, and if I cut a 2-inch strip, I have a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance at the bottom and a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance at the top. So now what I need to do is I need to cut my pieces, the sides. So the top and bottom are cut, and I will do this right-handed for you. So I'm just going to pop this in place on my fabric, and I've got a rotating cutting mat. So I've got my template, and I've just allowed a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to cut across. Pop this on here, rotate my mat, just spread my fabric out, and again on this side, just give myself a generous 1/4 inch seam allowance, cut through, and that's 2 of my pieces cut. For the next cut, all I have to do is pop my template on and cut with my generous 1/4 inch seam allowance. Continue working all the way across my strip. So for those that have full width fabric, so about 42 to 44 inches, you will need to cut 3 strips of fabrics. You may get your 35 out of 3 strips. You may need to cut a 4th. If you're working on fat quarters, you will probably need to cut 6 2-inch strips, and you may need a 7th depending on the width of your fabric. So from your light fabric, you need to cut 35, and from your dark fabric, you need to cut 35 as well. So there we go, all prepared. So that's our half hexagons. Now the next step that we are going to do is we need to cut our diamond shapes. So again, I'm going to cut a 2-inch strip from my fabric. This time I'm working from a fat quarter. So I will need a couple more strips with this one. So start with, for your full width of fabric, start with 2 strips across your fabric because the diamonds interlock to each other quite well. You don't need as much fabric. Start with 2 strips and then cut a 3rd if you need it. So I have, my fabric is doubled here. So I'm just going to pop that on there. Pop my template on. And again, with my generous 1/4 inch seam allowance, trim the edge and spin around. And again, trim the edge, pop your template over and trim. So you're going to cut 30 of those. So we need 1 for each section on our cushion. Now for our little triangle shapes, again, we're going to do the same thing. So you're going to lay your triangle on top of your fabric and just use the remaining strips that you have from your diamonds. So we need 10 of these. So again, I'm just cutting with my generous 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I am eyeballing it. It's not like machine stitching where we need an exact 1/4 inch seam. We are going to be turning our seam allowances over. So we're going to be stitching on a marked line. So our seam allowances really at this point aren't relevant. If you would prefer to lay your pieces on your fabric and cut with a pair of scissors, just add your seam allowance. That's perfectly okay. There is no problems with doing that. If you're wanting to fussy cut, you can do that. I'm not going into that in this project because we have got such tiny little pieces, but it is planned for an upcoming project. So get all those pieces cut, and then we're going to come back and we are going to start our glue basting. So I'll get prepared for that and I'll be back in a sec. Time to start glue basting our pieces together. So I have my pre-cut shapes, I have my Eppiflex shapes, and we're going to start basting them together. Now what's really important when you're basting is that you are consistent with the direction that you baste. So I baste anti-clockwise. It could be because I'm left-handed, or that's just what feels comfortable for me. Some of you will baste clockwise, and that's okay too. Now what we need to make sure that we have is that when we've basted our pieces together, you'll see on our half hexagons here is one of our tail is facing down and one tail is facing up. And we need to make sure that these are exactly the same with all of our pieces. So let's get started. Just going to use a little swipe of glue to hold our template in place. So just center it and push it down. And we are going to start with one of our angled edges. So just a few little dots of glue along the edge of our fabric, fold it over and press in place. Now the reason that we just put the glue on the edge of our fabric is that we're now gluing and holding in place down here, but our stitching edge is the folded line, and so we want to try and keep the glue away from the folded edge. So from there, just 5 or 6 little dots of glue, just to hold it in place. Just give it a second for the glue to dry. Our third side. And our fourth. And so I just double check and make sure that it's exactly the same as the previous piece. And so I am going to continue to glue baste all 35 of each colour. So I've got a couple more here that have been done. Okay. So you're going to glue baste 35 of each colour, which is what you will have cut. And then we are going to come back and we're going to do our diamond shapes. So we need our fabric, just a little swipe of glue just to help hold our template in place while we get started. And again, if we worked anti-clockwise, we're going to do exactly the same direction. I like to start on a side that heads into a point. Going to pop that there. Just a few little dots of glue on the edge of our fabric away from our stitching line. And again, work our way around the four sides. So we don't need to use much glue. We only need a little tiny bit of glue. And again, with our diamond shape, we will have one tail pointing up and one tail pointing down, and that's perfectly correct. So that's exactly what we need. So you're going to baste all 30 of your diamond shapes, and then all we have left is our little triangles. So I'm going to pop this on here. Now with the triangles, there's not a lot of choices for you. So as long as you work in the same direction, clockwise or anti-clockwise, whichever you've been doing, just work on the three sides. Okay. Now some fabrics will stick a little better than others. We just need them just held in place. So I can notice my little corner here is lifting. So if I felt I needed to, I could just put the tiniest little bit of glue there just to hold it in place. So that's all we need to do to get prepared for our stitching. So you've got lots of cutting and gluing together. The quantities of your pieces are actually in your pattern pack. You'll have a slip in there. So we're not dealing with the setting triangles just yet. So we're just working with the half hexagons, the diamonds and the small triangles. So get those prepared and then we will be back with the next step will be starting our stitching. See you soon. Bye.